Hi everyone, today we're going to be looking at feral children. These are children who grew up in the wild.
A feral child is a child that has been brought up from a very young age without any human contact, and they are usually abused or abandoned before they get a chance to develop the basic human traits that we all have.
The definition of a feral child is strange because feral simply means wild, not domesticated, the way animals are in nature, and humans are also like that in nature. Therefore, calling it a child who didn't have a contact with humans is correct, but it should more so be called a child who wasn't domesticated, because contact with humans doesn't mean that you're going to be domesticated. You are domesticated in civilization, which is slavery, whereas in the wild, you're free to do whatever you want. Feral is a word that's kind of looked down upon, even though it shouldn't be.
Now, feral children have been documented for centuries, and the effects this lack of human contact has on a child.
All children used to be feral before civilizations.
Has always fascinated yet baffled psychologists. But despite feral upbringings being so widely studied, there is another form that is just as interesting, and that's when a child is raised by animals and learns to hunt, eat, and be just like their new animal family. Now, we've all seen The Jungle Book and Mowgli's incredible time with his new animal friends, but the reality of being raised by animals can be much different. And although those involved may not necessarily be depressed or upset in the moment because they know no different, when they're attempted to be brought back into human civilization, there's more often than not some serious psychological problems.
Yes, because civilization is the problem. It's not as if they are in a wrong state and then you bring them to civilization, which is correct, and that's why there's a problem. It's because you're wrong and you try to brainwash them to be just like you, and you see the wild nature as wrong and the way they are behaving okay. Of course, if the child is actually behaving like a dog, that's a different story. I'm talking about wild human beings, because whether you're a child or a grown-up, if you grow up in nature, you're very wild. You cannot be domesticated, contained as easily. They're gonna do it with force, but nobody wants to live in societies, civilizations, and slavery, because it goes against your natural senses. That's why it's problematic.
Here are 5 cases of children being raised by animals and the outcomes such a thing can have on their physical and mental state. Kamala and Amala. The story of Kamala and Amala has attracted a lot of debate and attention since first being reported, and is one of the oldest cases in this list. It started in 1920 when Indian clergyman Joseph Amritlo Lasing claims he discovered 2 human-like creatures living with a wolf family in a den that had been carved into an abandoned termite hill in Bengal, India. Singh believed that they were human as they looked much different to the wolves, so he captured them and took them to the nearby orphanage he ran. It was there where he discovered they were...
It's very interesting in general how animals oftentimes take especially baby animals, young animals, to them, even though it's a different species, whether it's humans or whatever animals, and then they bring them up as if it's their own children or their own family. This happens pretty often.
In fact, 2 human girls, Kamala being aged around 8 years old and Amala was about 18 months. He and his wife looked after them, and in his diary, Singh described that their behaviour and appearance was wolfish. They were ferocious and walked on all 4s, which had resulted in hard calluses on their hands and knees. And
yes, the body simply adapts to however you're living. Obviously, people in nature don't have shoes. Their feet would in general be different.
Even ate in a crouched position, licking liquids like a dog and preferring raw meat.
Raw meat, of course. He talks about it as if it's strange. Humans in nature eat raw meat. Obviously, because it's the natural version of the food. It's just the meat. Cooked meat is unnatural. There should really be only meat and cooked meat. There shouldn't even be such a thing as raw meat. We shouldn't even be using these words, because there's only meat in its natural state, which is raw meat. And then there's cooked meat, which is unnatural. We talk about it as if it's something even different, it's something else, even though it's just the natural state of the meat. he talked about them being on all fours and then also raw meat, kind of equating it to other animals as if it's super strange, and maybe walking on all fours is probably strange. There was some tribe or whatever that did actually do that. I don't know why they did that. Maybe they also grew up with wolves or whatever. Generally, people don't walk on all fours in nature. Who the hell knows? It used to be super long ago. I'm just gonna assume that we never did, because everything that I've seen says that we walked on our feet. My point is simply that he's trying to equate the walking on all fours and raw meat with being the same thing, as if it's all strange, even though we don't walk on all fours in nature, but we do eat raw meat.
They were also nocturnal and howled through the night, calling for their lost wolf family that they'd been taken from.
That sounds pretty cool, I gotta say. Being able to howl like that. Yeah.
All attempts to humanize them failed, and they refused to speak or wear clothing.
Yeah, but that's again the thing. You didn't try to humanize them, you tried to make them into domesticated, civilized beings. If you try to humanize them, then you would still let them eat raw meat, because humans in nature also eat raw meat. So this is the huge difference, which they don't understand, between how humans are in the wild and how humans are when they are domesticated, living in slavery.
Sadly, just a few months after being separated from the wolves, Amala died of a kidney infection possibly caused by worms, and Kamala became...
Yeah, she died months later, but it was caused by a kidney infection which was caused by worms from the scary raw meat, right? You could say that if you found her dead and you actually did an autopsy, something, but just to say that, absolute fear-mongering.
...ill but survived. Singh claimed the girl seemed to show no human emotion, but after Amala had passed, Kamala was clearly heartbroken and showed significant signs of grief in the months after. Now alone and unable to relate her animal behavior to her sister, Kamala was comforted even more by Singh's wife and slowly began to learn some human mannerism. She would mostly stand upright to move around, and she started to develop a small vocabulary, as well as recognize colors and others around her. By now, the world was aware...
Why would she not recognize colors? What does that have to do with anything?
...of Kamala, and she was invited by the Psychological Society of New York to make her first public appearance. The invitation was declined as her health was deteriorating, and on the 14th of November 1929, she died after contracting tuberculosis. After
Wait, what did they do to her? Tuberculosis? Okay, yeah, could be just a coincidence, but strange, huh? They live in the wild, go back to civilization and die, both of them.
Researching Mr. Singh's diary of the events, it's believed the pair must have been abandoned when Amala was born, and since she was around 18 months when they were found, they must have been living with the wolves for that period. Why they were left is unclear, but psychologists have come up with a theory that the two girls could have been autistic with congenital defects. Whether this was the reason they were abandoned, or whether they both developed this from growing up with the animals is unsure, but it just goes to show the psychological and cognitive effects being raised by animals can have on humans. Cambodian Jungle Girl. On January the 13th, 2007, a young woman who had been spotted previously stealing food by locals emerged from the jungle of Ratakhaniri province in a remote part of Cambodia. She was completely naked, filthy and scared, and had obviously been sleeping rough for a while. A nearby family came forward and claimed she was their missing daughter who had disappeared in 1988 with her 6-year-old sister when she was just 8 years old, which if true would make this girl 27 years old, meaning she had spent 19 years of her life in the jungle. They said her name was Rochom Ing and looked after her, but she found it hard to adjust to civilized life, and despite around-the-clock care from them, she would often escape and head back to the jungle. Much like when prisoners...
Of course. Wait, much like what? Wait, what?
...prisoners who spend long periods of time in jail and find it almost impossible to adjust to normal life. This was the same cycle...
Oh my god. Oh my god. Wait, did I just understand that correctly? Is he saying that life in the wild, in freedom, was the same as life in prison? Literally the other way around. Are you joking? She felt like she's in prison, in society, obviously. And that's why she wanted to escape to freedom. What? This guy is insane. Whoever made this video.
Psychological effect Rochon was having. Jungle was her home. Whilst in the company of her new family, she would resist wearing clothes and could only speak 3 words: father, mother, and stomach ache.
Yeah, and what else do you need?
She would prefer to crawl around on all 4s rather than walk, and to indicate she was hungry or thirsty, she would point to her mouth. For several years, Rosham had great difficulty
Yeah, again, what's the problem exactly?
adjusting. She was depressed during the day and restless at night, and was admitted to hospital on several occasions.
Yeah, because what did you do to her? Probably try to feed her some kind of rice, grains, and whatever they eat in Cambodia. You probably malnourished her. You can be malnourished in the wild if you don't get enough food. For sure, there's been cases of that. If you're not good at hunting.
In May 2010, she again escaped to the jungle and was missing for over a month until she was finally found in a 10-meter deep toilet, standing up to her chest in human excrement. As far as we are aware, Rosham is still living with her family and has regular visits from a psychologist, but she still prefers to live outside of the family home in a small...
Yes, a psychologist from civilization who went to some kind of university and learned that the wild nature is bad. How is she or he gonna help her? Absolute nonsense, man. What does he or she understand about human nature and how we are actually supposed to be naturally? Nothing.
Chicken coop and cannot speak a language. The condition of Rosham
Good.
indicated that she had lived in the jungle most of her life, but it's not sure if she was raised by animals or lived in solitude. But judging by the way she crawled around on all 4s and acted like an animal suggests she was definitely at least in the company of them. To add a little more...
Yeah, because you can survive as a woman alone, but it would be hard. It's more likely that she was with other animals, and that's how she got her food.
Uncertainty to this case, the family who claims she was their daughter, and who she is still living with, refused to have a DNA test, so we may never know if they really are her family, or if her age and subsequently time in the jungle is correct. The Wolf Boy of Moscow. In 2007, villagers living near a remote forest in the Kaluga region of central Russia found what they called a wild male creature living in a lair made of sticks and leaves deep in the forest. The temperature at the time of the discovery was freezing, so concerned villagers reported the find to the police. They went in and rescued the boy, took him to a clinic in Moscow and named him Lyuka.
It's interesting how much your body can adapt to any temperature, whether it's very hot or very cold.
A police spokesman described the boy as looking around 10 years old, although it was believed he was much older than he looked. At the clinic, he was given clothes and a wash, which he forcefully refused, and his claw-like toenails were cut down.
Wow. Very interesting.
Lyuka appeared to be intelligent but did not speak Russian or any other language. He instead growled like a dog, and it was suspected that he had been living in the wild for many years, most likely with a pack of wolves, and although he did not move around on all 4s like them, he walked with half-bent legs. It was concluded that the boy was a danger to others, and despite his size, he was
A danger to others. Yeah, technically true, but come on. A wild human is a danger to society. That's true. That is actually true.
incredibly strong and aggressive, and had very sharp teeth.
He was incredibly strong and aggressive and very sharp teeth. Oh, this is very interesting, actually. That says a lot about how we are in nature. But yes, a wild human or any wild animal doesn't belong in society because you're not domesticated. You're not going to follow any rules. Because to be in society, you have to grow up as a brainwashed slave. You have to follow everybody like a sheep. When you come from the wild, you can't because you're only used to freedom. That's all that you know. You do every day what you want to do. You cannot adapt to these rules. And if somebody bullies you, for example, imagine him going to school, you know what a wild human is going to do, then they just cannot live in society.
That could inflict serious damage if you bit someone.
Very interesting. Because we would always be eating a lot of meat from the bone. Also, we would be chewing a lot. Our teeth, our bones in general would be way stronger. You don't even understand how strong human bones are in nature compared to our brittle garbage jelly bones. I'm serious. What a joke we are today. Pathetic. And that's why you could just use your teeth for anything and you would sharpen them. Absolutely.
Didn't happen, however, as just 24 hours after being sent to the clinic, Lyuka escaped and has never been seen again.
Wow. Yes! Yes! Блядь! Хорошо, блядь. Ну да. Молодец.
Many experts think that it's unlikely he is still alive, as after some tests
He's probably totally thriving. Come on, what are you talking about?
were carried out in the clinic, it was thought he had severe psychological problems and carried several viruses and infections.
Oh, viruses. Oh, wow, oh my god. You know what they were gonna do to him. I'm not gonna say on YouTube. You get it, right? He actually is. Wow, good job, man. They were gonna do you know what to him because of the viruses and his psychological problems. Also, that's another thing. Yeah, he had psychological problems. Yeah, for sure. He wasn't more sane than any of you. No. Oh my god, man. This society is just. Oh, I'm so glad that he escaped. Wow, man. He's living the best life possible, probably.
But until he is sighted or his body is found, as far as we know, the wolf boy of Moscow is still living wild once again. Oxana Malaya. Oxana was born in Ukraine on November the 4th, 1983, and showed no signs of any abnormality.
I saw this years
She was taken
ago.
home from hospital by her parents, who unfortunately were chronic alcoholics and showed her no care as they wanted a boy instead. By age 3, Oxana was severely neglected and had not learned the basic skills most have at that age. At this stage, she had been left outside to care for herself and instinctively looked for shelter and warmth. This is when she crawled into the family farm kennel and curled up with the mongrel dogs that lived there. Rejected by her human parents.
It's interesting. Sometimes dogs attack children or any humans, but as we can see, oftentimes they also take care of them.
Oxana was adopted by the human dogs and lived with them for 6 years, eating raw meat, barking and walking on all fours just like...
And again, interesting, right? They eat raw meat for years, no problems. Yeah, they will say that they have problems, they will try to think of something, but come on.
They did. They showed her love, attention and care, something she had not received from her parents, and if it wasn't for a concerned neighbour who reported her living conditions to the police, she would have continued living with them for much longer. When police turned up to investigate, the now 8-year-old Oxana ran at them barking and growling before she was taken away. She could not talk properly and lacked many basic...
Yeah, it's because you learn everything from the animals, how to behave. Is it better to learn that... I don't even know what I should say on YouTube, but you understand what people learn today. I'm just not going to say anything. Everything that we get brainwashed to believe, is that better? Is it better to go to kindergarten, to school, and be forced to learn stuff that you don't want, to sit like a slave? Yes, sir. Yes, teacher. Very good. But teacher, I'm not really sure if that's true. What? Don't talk to me. You don't talk. You listen, you repeat like a slave. That's going to be your life, okay? And that's what you learn in school. And then you never question anything because you're afraid, basically also. And that's how you go through life. Is that better?
Human traits. She would run around on all fours, eat food off the floor and cleaned herself like a dog. Here is a video of her shortly after she was rescued that shows how being brought up without human contact and nothing but animals can massively change the behavioral traits of a child.
I think that it's better to behave like a dog than to behave like the people of today who are brought up in civilization. Ideally, of course, you grow up with humans in nature. You're a feral child, a human, who grew up with wild humans. Of course, that's ideal. Yeah, I remember seeing this. I saw this very long ago, before I was into raw meat or anything. But even back then, I thought that it's kind of strange, but I didn't think that she was doing bad, as if it's a bad thing.
After this, she received intensive specialized therapy and education, and although she will remain intellectually impaired, she can now speak fluently and has a job at the hospital.
is she really intellectually impaired? What do you even mean by that? That she can't write man-made symbols, right? Or what? Would be interesting to know what they actually mean, because if she ate raw meat, she's 1,000,000 times more clever than you.
Farm where she lives. Oxana's case is one of the only raised by animal stories out there with video footage of the effects it can have, and it really throws fuel on the fire to the age-old psychological debate of nature versus nurture, and whether or not a human's personality, talent, and development are majorly affected by life experiences and the environment from a young age, and not necessarily natural-born intuition. Ugandan Monkey Boy. John Sabunya was born in Uganda in 1988, and at the age of just 2 years, he witnessed his father murdering his mother. Terrified he would be next, John fled into the Ugandan jungle, where he remained for 3 years. Whilst there, a bunch of vervet monkeys offered him roots, nuts, and fruit, and then taught him how...
Also interesting. There's a lot of cases of monkeys attacking people. But again, when it comes to young children, it's oftentimes different. They feel like they need to take care of them.
to search for food and climb trees. During this time, the area was in the middle of a civil war, so very few humans ventured into the jungle. But when a lady was searching for firewood, she came across a pack of monkeys and noticed that one of them looked different. She ran back to her village and informed the people, who then went out to investigate. On closer inspection, they realized it wasn't a monkey, but a 5-year-old boy. He was eventually rescued, but he and the monkeys put up a fight and were throwing sticks and stones at the villagers. When he was taken back, he was nursed by the locals, but not without complications. Feeding him hot food made him ill, and apparently a 4-foot-long intestinal worm was removed from him. The villagers believed he wouldn't have lived long if he hadn't been rescued.
Hot food? Cooked food? Or what do they mean by hot food? Because he wasn't used to it? He was used to warm food. Where would you get hot food in nature anyway? And he says supposedly. He also said something about worms before. Is this just an assumption that you would get worms? And you can, for sure, get worms. I have a whole video about this. It's a long and complicated topic. I'm not going to try to explain it here. Let's just say that it's very different than what you think, these worms and parasites and everything. But whatever the case, there's not even a confirmation if it even happened.
He needed special care, so was taken in by orphanage owners Paul and Molly, and despite only spending 3 years with the monkeys, he displayed many of their traits, like not making eye contact and greeting people from the side rather than face first. Paul and Molly slowly rehabilitated him, but even after 10 years, John was still pulling his gums back when he smiled, and had a strange lopsided walk. Today, John is living a normal and prosperous life and has no serious psychological problems following his upbringing. He has moved on and has even gone on to become part of the Pearl of Africa Choir, which he has done many tours with. But he will never forget that if not for the vivid monkeys of Uganda, who he said cared and loved him as if he was one of their own, he would have no doubt died in the jungle a long time ago.
There's also some cases on Wikipedia which you can read about if you're curious. This one, age 3, found on 7-8. Fed him the best meat from the hunt. Raw meat, obviously, but people just don't get it nowadays. He was later sent, became accustomed to human society, but said he preferred the wolves. That's exactly what I meant. Come on. Another wolf story. Age 12, apparently raised by wolves. He was dark-skinned, covered in short hair, and ate both cooked and raw meat. Obviously, not cooked meat with the wolves, but what they mean is that he got accustomed, domesticated into eating cooked meat, but he still wanted to eat raw meat also, so that's interesting. He still learned to walk and understand hand signs, but never spoke. Also interesting because we learn languages as children, as toddlers, it starts, as babies also, depends. And if we don't, why would we then later learn language? This is really when you learn all of the languages. I grew up with 2 languages and I've just always had them in my mind. Yeah, you just can't get rid of them. Kind of the same way you can't get rid of not learning a language. This was more interesting than I imagined. I should look more into this topic. As I said, I knew about that girl who grew up with the dogs, and I had also read about some other stories in the past. But this is very interesting when it comes to the food that they eat, raw meat, seeing as that's what I promote. for me it's very interesting to read about this, and especially if I would see photos and videos. It was also interesting to hear about the bones, the teeth, which I already had studied. I already understand how we are in nature and how much more healthy and robust we are. But still, it's always interesting to hear about it and to confirm it. And psychologically also, it's interesting to see what happens to humans. Again, as I said, no, you shouldn't, of course, grow up with wolves necessarily, at least not only with them. We always had dogs and wolves around us, sometimes also hunting with us. That's been going on for ages, other animals also. But of course, if you bark and walk on all fours, it's not how it should be, naturally. But as I said, growing up in a civilization, in these modern societies, and then learning what they teach you to become an obedient slave, no way that that's better. That could never be better. Then I would rather be a barking dog that walks on all fours. That's what I would have rather learned as a child than going to kindergarten and learning what I told you before. I don't even want to go over it again because society just pisses me off pretty much. It's just garbage. Thanks for watching.